honorifique et lourde responsabilité de...
I'm going to conduct this interview with Jeremy Irons, a very interesting film, The House of the Spirits. Thank you very much to the Jan Michalski Foundation for their invitation for this screening. As you can see, we all have headsets. I do not trust my English, so I will listen to Jeremy Irons' replies in French in my headset, and he should be able to follow my questions in French. He will hear the English translation. He does not trust my French either, so he'll hear my questions in English.
I don't trust my French.
Did you like the film? Did you enjoy this film? When have you last seen this film?
I last saw this film about 15 years ago, and I find it very moving, very moving. I loved the character that I was asked to play, Esteban Trueba, and I loved working with this extraordinary cast. Strangely, I think the strength of the cast worked against us when the film was originally released. We just had a movie called Like Water, Like Chocolate, a Mexican movie, very much with a South American feel, but with indigenous actors, actors of the right nationality. And beside that, it was a wonderful film. Beside that, to see House of the Spirits with that very starry cast of Americans and English people in the main worked against us, I think. But now I look at the film and I don't see that. I just see that extraordinarily broad tapestry, maybe a little too broad. It's a long film, and the last 20 minutes I thought, I felt the length. Billy originally wanted 3 hours and a half, but the notorious Harvey Weinstein was our producer, and he made Billy cut it to that length, which I think he was right, even though at the time Meryl Streep was very unhappy that her character, what she felt was diminished by the shortening. But, you know, it is what it is. And for me, a real revisit. I found it very emotional at times.
Indeed, there is a difference between the way you speak about films and the way we talk about novels, books. Every time we talk about a film that's aged, we tend to forget how it was received when it came out. Was it profitable? That seems to be the main issue when we would say, for example, that The House of the Spirits, as you were saying, was not very well received when it came out. And I think it cost $40 million, but it did not bring in as much money. So I was wondering, I don't want to bother you with this question. Did you perceive this as a failure? And in a way, more generally speaking, in the way you see how your films are received by the public, does that have an impact on your perception? Do you start doubting the film? You're saying now it might have been a bit too long because you've just seen it again, but is this the kind of thing you've realized when the film came out? And the criticism. I've read lots of reviews from the time. Some were very brutal, and maybe for the reasons that you mentioned, too many stars coming from the US or coming from the UK in a film that's a very broad tapestry in Chile. So maybe people didn't want to believe in that. Maybe it was a bit fake, but I have not felt that seeing this film again. I think it's one of its qualities. I'm coming to my question now. The way you perceive a film, does it change with the way the public and people view and review your film?
Yes, if you've been involved in a film, the way you perceive it changes over time. First of all, you read a script. You fall in love with the story. You read the book to fill in the gaps that the script doesn't have. You then live that story, and then you see the finished product. And of course, what you remember from each scene, you still see it as an actor. You remember what you were trying to do in that scene. You remember where you did that scene. You remember, you feel whether you failed or whether you succeeded. It's still very much you, the actor, are in the way, because you are the actor, and you know what you were trying to do. You know what you were feeling. But then time passes, and now I'm able to look at it as if it's another person. I'm able to see the characters for what they are, rather than the actors playing the characters. And I don't remember what I was trying to do in some of the scenes. As an actor, I will watch moments and think, that works, that's good, that doesn't work so well. Strangely less with this film. I was very happy with this film. I felt an enormous engagement with Esteban, a man unable to show his emotion, unable to be in touch with his emotion, but a man who nevertheless felt deeply, but just couldn't show it. And I think there are many men who have this problem, especially in my country, maybe less so in the Spanish countries where there is more passion. But I know one of the pleasing things when this film came out were the number of women who came up to me and said, "That was my father." And I thought, good. So I found something which is true, which people recognize. So as time passes, I think you can see more clearly a film. And looking at that, I think Billy did a very good job. But it does, your relationship with it changes. Films are a bit like wine. You know, you do your best when you're crushing the grapes and feeding the vines and all of that. You do your best. You're trying to create a great wine, and then you lay it down. And over time, it may get better, it may stay the same, or it may remain miserable as a wine. And there's a magic in that. If we knew how to make great wines, we'd all be very wealthy. If we knew how to make great films, we'd all be very wealthy. It's not only the people who make the film and who are working together to try to create the same story. See, that's why it's different from a novelist. A novel comes just from you, but a film is everybody's interpretation, the designer, the cameraman, the director, the actors. It's their interpretation of what they get from your book. And even with the writer. You know, the writer, Harold used to tell me, Harold Pinter, who adapted John Fowles's French Lieutenant's Woman for the screen. Harold said, I read the book. I read it maybe twice or three times. Then I close it and I put it away. And I leave it for a few weeks. And then I think back to it, think back to what I remember. And then I start writing. And I think that's as good a way as any of adapting a book. What stays with you? Now, something else might stay with another adapter. But this is why the film you adapt, or the book you adapt, will be particular to you. And every decision made changes that adaptation, the choice of director, what touches him about the book, about the script. The actors, what do they connect with in the character? And there are infinite number of choices on that route. And that's why when you uncork the bottle, you really don't know how it's going to be. But if everybody's doing their best, then, you know, we were not doing this for the money. We were doing this because we were craftspeople, and we were trying to do our craft as best we could. And that communal, and I must say this again, it is communal. I mean, there's a director's name up there, but it's a communal thing. It comes from everybody, from the costume designers, from the casting people. What we've created is that.
And which is why some critics can seem unfair, because with a few reviews, they can wipe away the work of hundreds of people, which is terrifying, and we tend to forget that. But a bad review for a novelist is not much better, I have to say. You were talking about a communal work. If we could go back to Harvey Weinstein, who wanted a shorter film. But at the start, Billy August presented you with a script, or he asked you to read the novel first? And that script, was it a 5-hour script? Did you accept that role knowingly, or did you work together with him on certain of these issues, on some longer bits? Did you read the novel?
I, of course, read the novel, but I read the script first.
Je suis pas sûr que tous les acteurs.
The script is what you're making. The novel is backup. The novel is, you know, you fall in love with somebody, and then you want to find out about their background. It's the same thing with the script. You read the script, you fall in love, you think this is wonderful. Now I want to know more. And that informs you in the way you play the script, if it's a good script. There's nothing worse than actors who want their parts to be bigger because it was bigger in the book. It's important that you realize that this is a new creation, a new form of a particular story. And so Billy showed me the script. I liked it very much. Then I read the book. And no, he'd created the characters. I said, this is very long, Billy. It'll be sort of 3.5 hours. Will they allow you to release that? And he said, oh, yeah.
Il est vrai que Billy August
Billy August just got 2 Palmes d'Or in Cannes, and I think he had quite some leeway. He trusted his own possibilities, right?
Yeah, he did. But Harvey Weinstein, for all the bad press and bad behavior that he's gone through in the last years, was a wonderful producer. I mean, we must not forget that. He helped so many films. He had a wonderful nose for what the audience would like. And I think cutting this, he was absolutely right. I mean, the Italian film Cinema Paradiso is another example of Harvey's great talents. That film, I think, was released 3 times in Italy and was a disaster each time. And Harvey got hold of it and seriously cut out a whole thread through it. And it became an enormous success. And I've seen the original Cinema Paradiso, and it's not very good. So he was a man of great talent for all his morality, or him.
Mais c'est vrai qu'on rêve toujours d'avoir le
director's cut. Yeah, we dream of seeing the director's cut, but the producer's cut is probably better.
It depends. It depends. I think it's very good for actors to have a director. I think it's very good for directors to have a producer. I sort of dread being asked by a writer-director to be part of his film. I've done it once or twice, and I always feel a regret that he didn't have someone at the story, the script, didn't have someone more removed from it to judge it and to turn it into a film. I think it's often quite difficult for writer-directors to get a clear vision of their work. Same as it is with actors, to get a clear vision of their work. It's very good to have somebody you trust who can see it with a slightly clearer perspective than you can when you're totally absorbed in it. I mean, there are successful writer-directors, but I think in the main, it's not too good.
I wanted to go back to one of the themes we wanted to talk about this morning, adapting books and novels and films. The House of the Spirits is adapted from Isabel Allende's work. The film we saw yesterday in Lausanne, The French Lieutenant's Woman, is also adapted from John Fall's novel, which itself was inspired on Thomas Hardy. And I think John Falls himself had said he was trying to do another Tess at a more modern era. And we think of all these things when we see the movies. And the third film that we're going to see is Un Amour de Swan, which is going to be shown tonight. Swan in Love, also adapted from a book. So many films come from literature. It's very hard to say you're a specialist in adaptations, because I think 80% of films in general are based on a literary interpretation, but adapting a very good book, a great novel, is something different, and it has an impact on the way you play your part and your character. Those are very large characters. For example, in The French Lieutenant's Woman, and obviously in The House of the Spirits, it's a very broad character. And also Charles Swan, you played Kafka with Soderbergh. So I was wondering.
And another Billy August movie, Night Train to Lisbon.
Night Train to Lisbon.
Yeah.
Yes, exactement.
Yes, Night Train to Lisbon, which is more recent, adapted from a Swiss author, Pascal Mercier. Maybe a lesser-known film that came out in 2017, I think. So, going back to the character you're playing and why you're the one who's been cast for these characters, that mysterious, very British character and this inner life that these characters seem to have, something you cannot really read on their face, their worry and what they're going through, like Esteban Tueba and also Swan, who's madly jealous. And also this neurosis in the film we saw yesterday. So my question was about the character. Those characters, do you appreciate, do you like them? And with your rapport to literature, with these roles, do you feel more at ease? These three films that we're seeing here, did you talk with the people in Lausanne and did you say, I want to see these films, I want to see them again, I'd like to present them, or is that a pure coincidence?
No, I gave a list, I think, of 8 or 10 films and allowed them to choose. And because Lausanne is the festival it is, they went for literary adaptations, which is clearly the right decision. If a novel is a good read, a good novel, then there will be more information in that novel about the characters than in a normal film script. There is greater depth there. You also, of course, have the because the adapter has been adapting something that has been thought about at depth by the writer. And because of that, and because of your ability to go back to the book and mine even deeper, I think one becomes more submersed in the characters. You know, I mean, I don't like acting very much. I've always thought it's a little bit vulgar. I used to say in my younger days that it was like knicker elastic, something that under a finely cut pair of denim jeans shouldn't show. You would assume that the lady is wearing knickers, but you don't want to see the knicker line under the jeans. And for me, acting is like that. You would assume that everyone is acting, but I would love it not to show. And I've always approached acting in that way. So characters who don't wear their hearts on their sleeve, I find very attractive. People who feel deeply, but for whatever reason are not able to let it out in the American way, share it with everybody, I find attractive. In French Lieutenant's Woman, Mr. Smithson is a Victorian gentleman. Victorian gentlemen did not show their sexual emotion. We remember that the Victorians would cover the legs of their pianos in case they were too provocative to the male sex. And Meryl and I used to talk about living in a sexual pressure cooker that we tamped down, but that tamping down made the temperature and the steam within go berserk, but we were holding it down until the moments when we let it free, in a way that today's generation doesn't. We let it all hang out, you know. So Personally, I believe that sex today is not half as interesting as it was. Because it's not unknown, it's not forbidden, it's not hidden. And even when we had discussions about hajibs, I think, the Arabs know what they're doing. Keep it all secret, keep it all private, keep it all hidden. And I remember being in Abu Dhabi, in a large shopping area, mall, beneath the hotel where I was staying. And I came out of a store, and a woman from the far side of the square walked across towards me, completely wrapped. I didn't see her eyes, walking towards me. And I found it extraordinary, the eroticism of the moment. I mean, she was doing nothing. She was obviously going to buy some sardines or whatever. But she walked across towards me, and my heart stopped. So that was the area we were working in Friendship Tenant. Esteban, of course, is not in touch because of his upbringing, because of his life, his early life, not in touch with his emotions at all, and knows only force and hard work and, if you like, cruelty, without realizing that's what it is. Towards the end of his life, those emotions begin to bubble within him, but he's hardly over-responsive. In Swan, I haven't seen Swan for so long, so I can't remember much. But I remember a man of great elegance and, once again, not able to really express himself emotionally. I think it's an area that has always interested me because I was brought up, an English middle-class public school boy, destined for the army or banking. And it wasn't until I started practicing being an actor at drama school that I remember I first put my arm around my father and developed a relationship where I could kiss him at the age of 19. Had I not become an actor, maybe that would never have happened. Maybe I would have stayed locked in a sort of unemotional loneliness that I think many men have, or used to have. Certainly the men who went through those terrible wars when their emotions were so battered and damaged, came out of them without really being able to get in touch with their heart and their soul because of what they'd been through.
Alors c'est vrai qu'il y a beaucoup de points communs.
It is true that there is a lot in common between the French lieutenant's woman and Swan as characters. But with Esteban Trueba in the first two-thirds of the film is an extremely violent character, and we hope that there will be a redemption, but at the same time there is so much cruelty, it seems impossible. But what carries the film, in my view, is this first loss, or rather the death of the elder sister that he was engaged to, and then from there you see that something will need to be resolved. And so when you accept to play this role, when you accept it, are you looking at the fact that something will have to be reconciled, and does that help you in playing this violent character? Well, in another film we've seen you play a really nasty character in Die Hard.
He was a very, very naughty man who lived his own rules, and that I find attractive. However, go ahead. Go on.
Oui, ça vous attirait quand même.
Yes, it was attractive to you. You've accepted to play the film not only for financial reasons, I guess, but because it's exciting to play a really mean character in an action movie. But you've managed to carry this character, even to love the character, even in the worst scenes of the film, by holding back on the feelings, because there are moments in the film where we simply cannot believe that there will be redemption. But of course, we appreciate it when it happens. But I guess it's not really a question I'm asking you. Maybe this is not telling anything to you.
Well, no, it's very valid. As an actor, you look for the phrase in the character. You look for the progression in the character. And in great stories, the characters have that progression. And so you know that you can play the bad to its fullest extent, which will help the redemption make more sense. The harder you play the bad, the better the good will be. And as an actor, you want that emotional movement through a film. They don't all have that. I mean, the film like Damage, which I can't remember what you call here, which doesn't have that. It's more an education of a man. But you look for that progression, that phrase, that musical phrase, and when I was playing Shakespeare, I remember a great director, John Barton, at the Shakespeare Company, said to me, he said, when it comes, especially to Shakespearean characters, because they are some of the best written in the oeuvre, embrace the inconsistencies. Because as human beings, we are all inconsistent. We behave in one way at one time, another way at another time. The two don't, because we change, the situation changes. And poor writing, I think, doesn't build characters with inconsistencies. And so they become more two-dimensional, thinner, less interesting for actors to play, and probably less interesting to watch or to read. But I think the great characters have massive inconsistencies, which is why when you see Shakespeare performed, you can have many interpretations of character, because you can pick out certain actions and magnify them to give the character a different hue. But there are inconsistencies here. Great cruelty from the man, and yet, strangely, he is a man with heart, and that rubbing up against each other, I think, is really interesting, both for an audience and a reader, and for an actor playing it.
Bien sûr, et elle est parfaitement mise en scène, je crois.
And it is perfectly shown in the first 20 minutes of the film, where you have all your possibilities, opportunities, before you go into your cruelty, the cruelty of the character. And then also in the diary read by Bianca, and now I'd like to talk maybe about the female characters in the film. It's a rather classic distribution, let's say, between the patriarchal figure of this very harsh man and the passivity of the women, submission, but also the incredible lucidity identity of a character like Meryl Streep. And at the beginning she says, I am writing this diary because telling the events, retelling the events will give them meaning. And then she passes it on to her daughter, and that's also why we can accept this harshness, because the granddaughter, in a way, takes on the violence of her grandfather, and she, or his daughter, rather, his daughter. And my question was about this contrast. Did you talk about that a lot? Has it been agreed with Billy August, but also with Meryl Streep, how she analyzed her character in this relationship between the angel and the devil? You tell her in the film, "You're my angel, you're an angel," and it seems that it is because she's an angel that she saves him. In 2023, with feminism, feminist revolution, maybe she would look at the movie with some skepticism. But at the same time, there is strength to those women. They are submissive, yes, because it is that time, that era, but they also have great intelligence, great vision, while your character in the film doesn't have vision, doesn't see anything. He just goes ahead like a bull. So maybe it's a way to introduce here in the discussion the character played by Meryl Streep and your work with her, also in relation to the movie we saw yesterday. We know that she's a fantastic, great actress, and here again she plays a very torn character, ambivalent character between submission and lucidity.
She is an extraordinary actress. One of the most moving moments, I think, for me, in the movie is when she says to her daughter, I still love him.
Yes.
Because I understand him. And that says to me oceans when we talk about what's it called now, sort of liberation, Me Too and all of that. That women are very different to men, and I glory in that. And I get bored when, yes, I know that in society it's important that women are treated with respect and have as much chance and equality as men. But I will never believe they're the same. I envy women, what they have, their sensibility, their understanding, their hard work, their loyalty, all things which men often don't have, but which support men. And I hope that men have qualities which support women also. I think we need each other, and I glory in our differences. And at that moment in the film, I find it heartbreaking because what she's been through, and yet she says, I love him because I see him for what he is. I know him. He's a good man. He's not an evil man. It's just how he is. And unlikely to hear a man say that about a woman. So, I don't know, maybe in today's fashionable TikTok, Instagrammy days, there'll be people being appalled by the relationships we see on screen. But I think there's much historical truth, and there's not only historical truth, but there's a true insight into what relationships are all about and what we should aim for, and the inconsistencies of love and of relationships. They're not black and white. Relationships are not black and white. Men are not black and white. Women are not black and white. We're all so complicated. And if we listen to our hearts instead of printing out our views, then maybe we will be more understanding, understandable, responsible, feeling society. And I'd like to think, I don't think film makes much difference in life, but I'd like to think that people seeing this film might reevaluate what the strengths are between relationships between people, not just men and women, but men and men, women and women. I mean, I don't think there's any difference there, but between two people, and how complicated it is, and how delicate it is, how valuable it is, and how inexplicable it is.
Et c'est un film qui,
à mon sens, en effet,
and I think, and I didn't mean to ask you for your opinion on the Me Too movement, but rather to think about that relationship between men and women in this film. And that's probably inspired by Ingmar Bergman. Billy August got a Palme d'Or when he adapted the script from Ingmar Bergman, The Best Intentions. They were very close, the two of them, and we can feel that. And going back to that friction when the film came out, and that probably made it harder to understand Bergman and all the psychology of women, their emancipation, their liberation, and then we can also think of David Lean's film, like a very epic film, or maybe even something like Ken Loach, with all that political background that comes through the final part of the film. So I was wondering, women have a prominent role. You mentioned this passage in the film when Meryl Streep says, "I still love him." What I thought was, when she tells her own daughter, "You can't see Pedro right now, you need to wait for the world to change." She knows the world will change. He doesn't know that. Men don't know that. Women do. She knows that. And I think the magic realism, her powers, her supernatural powers, that didn't show as much in the film as it did in the novel, but it is there, and that side is, you know, somebody. She's a medium, and she's ahead of everyone else. So I'm mixing things up a bit, but this is a very complex film with different layers, and who knows, maybe it wasn't a great success because of that. I wanted to go back to that character, a Chilean, very broad representation. You come from the theater world, and you find yourself in an hacienda. Didn't you think that this was a very theatrical film as well? This hacienda is also something that could be found in a Greek tragedy. So in the way you acted in this film, you also said playing Shakespeare. Does that make a huge difference, playing Esteban Trueba in this context?
That's a very difficult question to answer.
Est-ce que vous trouvez déjà que c'est un film théâtral?
Do you think it's a theatrical film? There's lots of scenes shot within the house. There's the legitimate son.
I don't understand what you mean by theatrical.
Un film qui, d'une part, reprend
a film that would use some codes of the Greek tragedies or Shakespearean traditions with archetypal characters, and also the way the film is shot. So you've got those long scenes outside and political parts, but a big part of the movie is shot inside. It's not an action film, very intimate scenes involving the characters, and that's the Bergman inspiration or the Bergman side. And then there's also Ferula. We haven't talked about her yet, played by Glenn Close, and she comes straight from a Bergman film or from Rebecca from Alfred Hitchcock. Dressed in black, very theatrical. That
ballistic.
Et très romanesque aussi. Mais ce qui s'oppose justement.
But to me, there's an opposition with the epic theme, the political side, and the outdoors. I was wondering about how the film was shot. We see this epic depiction, but we also see scenes shot indoors with Glenn Close, Meryl Streep, in churches, and so on. Is that, would you qualify this as a theatrical way of working in a film?
No. I think it's just storytelling. I mean, in stories, you know, you're a writer. You set things in different places. Some scenes are outside, some are inside, some are in churches, some... there's the magical realism of this. There's, yes, an element of theatricality about that. But, no, But then, you see, for me, on stage, or on a film set, it is real, it is life. So I think your question should be maybe asked to the audience, whether they felt it as theatrical, whether they thought the character was broad, whether they were brought inside the characters. Because I'm very simple. I'm just an actor who becomes other people, and then shot in different ways, you know, by the director. So you have his vision, his images. I can't answer that question.
I understand.
Well, you know, if I'm playing Richard II, it's real. It's in a theatre, but it's real. It's life. It's happening. And I have to, as an actor, act in a slightly larger way, as those people did last night. If you saw the picture of Flying to the Moon, you know, you saw a lot of theatrical actors doing an enormous amount, because they were used to having to do that in these big theatres where you had to really reach the back. Film acting, the camera is there. The camera's inside your head. You don't have to play in the same way. So it's a question of scale, rather, but which you click into depending on the size of the auditorium. As an actor, you know, you have to be understood. Your emotions have to be understood by the people up there. So I have to use my whole body in a way. I have to use my voice in a certain way so that they can understand what I'm feeling, but hopefully still believe I'm real, and that I'm not acting, but that I'm real. A film camera is able to come inside you, and so you still have to think the thoughts and have the feelings, but you don't need to transmit them in the same way. So there is, yes, a difference in the acting style of theatrical and filmic, but when I'm doing it, be it in a 6,000-seater or be it doing it on a film stage, sound stage, for me, if I'm working properly, it is absolutely real where I am. Because unless I feel the emotions, the real emotions, how can the audience An awful lot of acting at its best, I think, is about transmission of emotion, thought transmission. An audience does a huge amount of the work for you. If they are really in tune with you, and if you are not doing things which put them off. Acting is like writing, like directing, like photography, like art, like painting. At its best, the actor is not there. The painter is not there. The writer is not there. It's a communication between the words, the paint, the drama, the film, a communication between that and the audience. And that's what I think all art is at its best. And we all know of artists who say, I did that. You can see it in my work. We all know film directors who do the same. We know novelists who do the same, who show off in their writing, who say, I'm a brilliant novelist, and you see it in the way they write. And then you have all those craftsmen who sublimate themselves. I remember my son, who is a photographer, he takes mainly, or he did take mainly landscapes and strange shapes and whatever. And it was quite difficult to understand what the photographs were. And I said, why don't you title them? He said, no, I want the photograph to speak to the person who sees it, and they will see what they want in it. I don't want to tell them what to see. So a huge amount is expected of the audience in all art, I think. It's a conversation. And when movies or painters are not appreciated at their time, it's because there's a disconnect somehow between the audience, the viewer, and the work. And sometimes it will take time for readers to begin to appreciate a writer, or viewers to appreciate painting, particular paintings. Sometimes it happens with film. Some films are seen much later as much better than they were, rather like this one. Sometimes they're seen as much worse, because the audience changes and the film stays the same, or the picture stays the same. So the relationship between the two changes.
Thank you very much. Est-ce qu'il y a parmi vous peut-être?
Is there, since you are the audience, as Jeremy Irons has just said, I'll turn to you. Are there any questions in the room? I think you need to wait for a microphone. Hello. Hello. I would like to know how you make your choices. What motivates you? Is it the script, the director, the other actors? How do you choose your roles? What motivates you most?
By the way, sometimes it's because they're going to pay me a lot of money, and I would like that. Those aside, and I think I can think of about 3 or 4 films that I've made for that reason, usually terrible, ones you've probably never seen. So there's that sometimes. Otherwise, it's a question of appetite. It has to be a story which I enjoy reading, which I would like to see on the screen. It has to be a character that I would like to get to know better, and who is different to other characters that I've played. I don't like walking in the same snow footprint. The director has to be a man whose work I admire and who I personally like. The actors have to be people I admire, who I think will make my game better. The producer has to be somebody who I think will not waste our time and will A, find the funds, and B, get out there and sell the picture. And that's about it. But it's a question of appetite. You know, sometimes you feel like an orange. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you feel like a banana. Or a nice bowl of soup. Your appetites change as you go day to day, or month to month, year to year. And when you get to my age now, your appetite is less. I have less need to get out there and pitch, which is probably a good thing, because as you get older, you look at the business and you see it having changed. Of course, everything changes. You see actors having become more commodities now. I mean, they always were, but they were dressed up as being of value. And the profession itself, I think, is less respected than it used to be. The art is appreciated by less people. I think the larger audiences are impressed by dazzle and by effects and by explosions and by chases and by adrenaline rush. Perhaps it was always so. I don't know. There is wonderful work being done at the moment by the big channels, you know, Amazon and Netflix, some of which I've done and been proud of. But I really value, and that's why I love this festival, because you go back and you look at older films. I really value great films. I think the only thing worthwhile in life is to do what you do as well as you can, and to appreciate what others do as much as you can. Life is a struggle. It's, you know, we're all trying to do our best. Some people are wasting their time trying to get rich. Well, forget them. And concentrate on the minutiae of life and just do it the best we can. And that's what I try to do. But it has to now, as I'm older and know there are less summers ahead of me, it has to be something really worthwhile in order to take up my time. Lausanne has been really worthwhile.
Merci. Peut-être une dernière question du public.
Thank you. One last question maybe from the public, from this gentleman.
Just have a brief question. Coming back to what you said about cutting the film. In this version, I was missing a scene which I saw in the last one, which I thought was essential for birth and death, which is when her parents come to visit. Here we saw only the explosion. In the other version, I saw her head flying off. It was in the bushes.
Yes.
And they went down from the house.
Yes.
To look for the head, and she knew where it was.
Yes.
Do you think it was just for shortening the film?
I have no idea. That's fascinating. I've forgotten all about that.
And it's so essential.
Absolutely. And it was in the original film, and I have no idea why it's not here in this version. I didn't miss it. I forgot about it. But this should have been the original version, and I don't know why. Yes, we didn't have the head. We'll have to ask wherever they got the film from.
Mais j'ai pas,
Quite right.
j'ai
Well
pas
remembered.
vu cette scène non plus. Ça veut dire qu'il y a eu un nouveau montage.
I haven't seen that scene either. So you mean there is a new version?
I don't know. This is supposed to be the original version. I have no idea whether someone thought that was too tasteless to show. We shall have to explore that, find out.
En effet, en effet. Alors oui, une dernière question peut-être.
Oui, Jeremy.
One last question. Yes, Jeremy, thank you for coming. Talked a lot about theater, and we'd like to know if you have any projects on theater. Would you like to go back on the stage? Did you miss it?
The last play I did was Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night, which is one of the richest stews you can eat as an actor. Fantastic play. And the problem is that when you've been through an experience, a great role in a great play like that, you judge everything by that. You know, you read something, you think, oh, I don't think that's, no. So I don't know is the answer, whether I'll go back to theatre. I have no burning desire. I love the theatre. I love filming. But to be a question of something that tickled my appetite. And if it did that, and I thought, yeah, but there's no role I want to play in the theatre. I just read a play, submitted to me, and it's a new play, and it's all right. But all right is not enough these days. It has to be something which I feel I can offer, something which other people couldn't offer. Otherwise, let them do it. This has always been my attitude toward directing. I've only directed once a short hours film for television. And I loved the experience, really loved getting performances out of actors, not only actors, but my wife, who's superb in it. I'm very bad, because I also acted in it, but I wasn't really interested in the acting. I was interested in the others acting. But I did enjoy it. And yet, I've never directed anything further in my life, because when it was offered, I would always say, no, ask him. He's a great director. He'll do it. I'm an untried director. And I don't regret anything in life, but I'm sorry I didn't try it. Maybe I will. Got a bit of energy left.
Bon.
I saw a film that you produced called Trashed.
Oh, yeah.
Are you still very much involved in the conservation movement?
Not really. I believe we're in deep trouble. I've always, in my, whether it be environmental or whatever particular cause I'm interested in, I've always worked as a voice piece, a mouthpiece to something to stir it up and remind people. My job, my celebrity, and that enabled me to do that with Trash. Of course, I'm appalled by the situation we're getting ourselves into. I can see no turning back. I think the next 100 years are going to be extraordinary. I hope the next two generations will deal with it. But I think things are going to change massively. Changes that will be forced upon us. I'm tired. We made Trashed, I think, 12 years ago. And I still find myself reading articles in the newspaper pointing out great discoveries that they've learned, that certain plastics, for instance, can get into your brain cells. We said that 12 years ago in our film. Human nature is very difficult to shift. Look at us here. Who can imagine that terrible things are to come? But I have no doubt they are. No doubt at all. We're doing nothing to change anything. We're still just concerned to to make money and to pollute the seas, the air, what we eat. Probably less so in Switzerland because you're, I think, cleaner, one of the cleaner countries. But the state of the world is in chaos, and either a great plague, as we smelt with COVID, or a great war will decimate us, and then when there are less of us, we will probably find a way of continuing on. Sorry to be so negative.
Je propose qu'on termine sur cette magnifique note d'optimisme.
Well, on this optimistic note, let us conclude.
Mille merci à vous. Mille merci à Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy Irons, for your generosity, for your honesty. Thank you very much.